New inflation numbers out this week showing inflation back up, jumped to 4%, second month in a row where the inflation rate rose. With more on this, let's go to Moshe Lander, senior lecturer in economics at Concordia University. Moshe, welcome back to the show.
Good morning.
So here's a quote from a big guy at CIBC, CIBC's executive director of economics, right? They say this. What is most concerning is that inflation accelerated more than expected, and that we also saw some core measures of inflation that the Bank of Canada track accelerate as well. So concern from a big old bank. What about you, Moshe? You got concern?
To some extent, yeah. Whenever inflation comes in higher than expectations, it either means that our models are not firing on all cylinders, or it means that there is a problem that even economists are unable to see. So, yeah, that's a problem. To me, it was the second part of what you said. It's that the core inflation measure, which strips out the volatile components, is drifting up. So even if you exclude food and energy, which is always jumping up and down, it still shows that inflation is coming in faster and faster. That's the worrying bit to me.
So what, despite all of the best attempts, what's behind the sort of unrelenting edge up?
So it's continuing to be problems on the supply side. And so when the Bank of Canada increases interest rates, that would in theory encourage firms and individuals to spend less, save more. If that were the only source of inflation, then we would have tamed inflation some number of interest rate hikes ago. The problem is that the supply side is unresponsive to interest rate changes. So if supply chains are disrupted, if you have worker strikes in Vancouver, if you have forest fires and hurricanes and excessive rain, no amount of interest rate changes are going to fix that. And so that's where the problem continues to come from. And the Bank of Canada can't throw up its hands and say, we can't do anything about it, because then Canadians would accept that inflation is now going to be 3 or 4% instead of the 2% they want. So they have to keep reminding Canadians that we have to do everything that we can to do our part to keep it under control.
Moshe, I'm genuinely confused about how our economy is doing, because I hear a lot of doom and gloom and our word recession. Oh, recession, it's coming, and that kind of thing. And then last night, again, it's what people are saying versus my anecdotal evidence. Last night I go to St. Denis Street. I went to Theatre St. Denis to watch Jim Jeffries. He was performing last night. And before the show, me and my friends were all together. We're like, oh, you know what? The lineup is forever. We're not going to get into the show for a long time. Let's go grab a quick drink before the show. Every single place was packed. We're looking around, and for everyone saying, oh, geez, people are going to go out. Things are going to be slowing down. Everything was busy. I see unemployment rate 4.5% in Quebec, and then I say, wait, so is the economy bad? It's so hard to go along with that with all of these things I see. So I'm confused, Moshe. Can you unconfuse me?
Sure. So let's use a bad analogy here. So, when you go over the crest of a mountain and you start to go on the downside, if you're in the midst of a mountain range, it's sometimes hard to tell if you've passed the peak or not. And so you can get a little bit confused as to what's going on, especially if it's very gradual. So what's happening now is the economy has kind of gone over its peak, and it's starting to go into a bit of a downtrend here. And so I think there's a little bit of recognition of, oh, we're on the downside now. We need to start behaving like we're on the downside now. And so we're just at that final kind of last grasp of enjoying the upswing. And I think that's what you're seeing on St. Denis or elsewhere in Montreal. It's that maybe the news hasn't quite registered yet. And that's true with businesses too. Until they start reporting quarterly profits that are falling below expectations, I don't think that they've necessarily even fully realized that maybe we are on the downswing.
So your crystal ball says that things are going to get worse. We're going to start to see this.
We're going to see a slowdown. I've been optimistic, though, that a recession is exactly what the economy needs. So I'm not hoping for like a real major recession, but I think a little bit of a down period isn't necessarily a bad thing. It gives everybody a chance to refocus and think about where's our money and is it being put to the best use. And when we come out on the other side, that does make us stronger. So, yes, things are about to slow down, but I don't know that that's necessarily the worst thing that could happen right now.
How important, the Bank of Canada's decision, how important is the cost of housing and the cost of homes? I see some metrics, cost of a home in Canada versus average household income. Canada compared to like all the other OECD countries, and you go, oh boy, we got it rough here in Canada. How important is the Bank of Canada looking at housing when they're trying to determine their next steps?
They are looking at it, and they've been cautioning for years that the housing market is dangerously overheated, and it just keeps rising, and they keep sending out the warning that this is overheated. The catch, of course, is that when they increase interest rates, people are saying, you're making things tougher and tougher for us. What the Bank of Canada is trying to explain is if they hadn't increased interest rates, then inflation would be worse and it would be showing up in other places that would be even more detrimental than showing up in the housing market. So they do factor it into their decision, but they do recognize that to some extent, if the housing market can't correct itself, say because supply can't keep pace with demand, again, if it's a supply problem, interest rate changes aren't really going to do much to fix that.
So let me ask you: there's another rate decision, interest rate decision coming end of October. Correct me if I'm wrong. What if you were the Bank of Canada? What do you do at that next decision?
Based on that inflation number, I feel like I have to give you a happy Thanksgiving, and here's another interest rate increase. It's just one of those things that you got to remind Canadians. You can't get complacent about this. You can't get used to it, and you can't be racing into your boss asking for 4 or 5% raises. You're just going to add fuel to the fire, and that's not going to help us get back to the way things used to be 20 months ago.
But it feels like not Moshe. It feels like the average worker in this country has been hit. Like the wage increases have not even come close to keeping up with inflation.
You're right. And unfortunately, part of what's causing a lot of grief for Canadians is that we really got addicted to that free money that existed for a pretty long period there. And so it made us make some decisions that were really questionable, taking on mortgages that were more than what we could afford, or borrowing against our line of credit to a limit that was probably too much, or just maxing out those credit cards thinking that the good times would keep rolling. And it's always that when a recession comes, it really exposes those that have been overextended. Wages haven't kept pace, but when inflation comes back to 2%, you can have a period where you can slowly claw that back. Might not help people that are near the end of their working lives, but people early on in their working lives have decades to make this back.
Moshe Lander is a senior lecturer in economics at Concordia. Thanks so much. It's always great talking to you.
Anytime.